Hi everyone, it's Sana and Mona Ali here with Lasya Rao. Today or this evening, we are running this training around how Lasya bought her first investment property. Lasya is a mentee of the Property Investors Group, and Lasya went on to purchase a property within 54 days of joining the Property Investors Academy, and it's been an amazing journey watching Lasya grow. And Mona and I believe, last year we'll be able to share wealth of knowledge with the group around the buying process. And also, so last year you went and bought a house with a granny flat. Tell us a bit about the property that you purchased.
Yeah, so as you said, house with granny flat. Ultimately, what I was looking for was a property that offered strong capital growth potential due to its location, but I also did want a higher than average Sydney rental yield just because of some of my more immediate goals, which could, be going back to university to study, taking a break, or even going overseas to work for a while and earning in foreign currency. So just keeping that all in mind, I wanted, a property that primarily focused on capital growth, but did also offer decent cash flow. So a house with a granny flat and high growth location seemed like a good blend of both.
Awesome. Good stuff, Lasya. So I guess you've come a long way just in a couple of months because we started talking a few months ago when we initially launched the Property Investors Academy. Just to tell us, what was life like before you joined Property Investors Academy, and where were you at in your property journey at that stage?
So I had been working for about 5 years full time after graduation, and I had been saving all the while. I was ready to invest my money in something, but I hadn't yet decided what. So I was in a position where I knew that I wanted to get a foot into the Sydney market. It's where my loved ones are, it's where my friends and family are, and I just wanted to make sure I also had a base here. But at the same time, I wasn't really clear on what kind of investment strategy would best fit my goals. So I was kind of looking for a mentor at that stage or seeking a little bit of advice.
So, what do you think was your biggest challenge or struggle in order to acquire that property at the time?
At the time, it really came down to being unclear about my strategy. I didn't really have a clear process for going through the purchasing journey. So it's very easy to go jumping down different rabbit holes when you're an inexperienced investor. You just don't necessarily know where the best
Sorry, Lasya.
opportunities are for you or
Yeah,
how to identify the best opportunities. Did I cut
yep.
out?
Yeah, you for a moment, but you didn't know how to identify the best opportunities at the
That's
time.
right. Didn't know how to identify the best opportunities. So, anything can look good, but it isn't necessarily the right thing for you. So, I was just in a position of trying to find the right investment strategy for myself and not knowing where to start. You just don't know what the unknown unknowns are.
Yep, and I recall also there was a bit of confusion whether you should go for a unit or you should go for a house, whether you should go for a more affluent area or more cheaper end of the market. There was a bit of that as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to get something strata titled in a location with really strong lifestyle drivers or whether I was going to go for something that more had development potential where I had perhaps more control over the asset and the ability to add value to it. And so I ended up leaning towards the latter, just considering all my long-term and shorter-term goals. And I think having more structure and process around investment really helped me.
So tell us, Asya, then, before you joined the Property Investors Academy, was there like a low point or did you hit rock bottom at some point and said, oh, something has to change? Like, what did you go through that process at all?
There were many points at which, I did feel a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of information I was finding. It's very easy to on one hand, there's a great wealth of resources online, but it's also very easy to get lost in those resources and not necessarily know the next steps to take. And so, I could read one thread in which one particular investment strategy was recommended, and then another thread which completely contradicted that one. And so I was a little bit confused at points. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a rock bottom, but there were definitely turning points for me as well in my investment journey. Yeah.
Well, Sana and I are talking to lots and lots of people day in, day out, and that's the most common thing people that we come across. People say that, oh, there's so much information, I don't really know what to trust and how to really sift through that information and really take what's relevant to me and apply that. So it sounds like that you probably felt the same, that you had access to a lot of information, which most people do in this internet age, but it's like narrowing down and focusing on what's important and leaving out what's not important, really. Would
That's
that be
right.
correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I had an experience that many buyers around my age would have as well in the Sydney market, which is that a lot of those locations where you might want to live for either convenience to work, or proximity to your friends or family, or just lifestyle, they can be out of reach for assets that you might want over the long term, like houses. So I had first entered the property market, or had first started searching for a property as a first home buyer, and who with like a first home buyer who was seeking to occupy the property that they bought. But then I had a turning point fairly early in my property search, where I realized that it was going to suit my goals better to rent vest and to purchase a high growth asset for investment instead, where I could afford to buy that high growth asset and rent where I wanted to have some of those lifestyle drivers.
Great, excellent. So it's just about making a choice, right? If you can't afford in a certain area and then you made a choice to buy elsewhere where it met the key criteria in terms of the growth you could have or the cash flow you could have with future potential, long-term potential, really, and honing in on that information and really applying that. So when you joined the academy, what is the number one goal you wanted to achieve when you joined us?
The number one goal was, of course, to purchase an investment property. But the number two was for me to learn the process. So where I see the Investors Academy being really attractive versus using a more traditional, like say, like full service buyer's agent, is that the Investors Academy kind of teaches you the process for yourself. You get to learn the mindset of a buyer's agent, at least a part of it, and then you get to apply those learnings again and again. So I think there's quite a strong value proposition there.
And why was it important for you to learn the ropes yourself?
For me, the way I saw it is I'm quite early in my investment journey. So if I choose to buy another property or multiple, I'll be able to repeat those learnings. And so I thought, what better time, than with the first purchase to learn how to identify the right property in the right location.
Yeah, and we had this chat early on as well. You were toying between whether you should work with a BA or whether you should join the academy. I mean, it was a bit of, a thinking process and some time. So, what I'm curious about is what other things did you try to achieve this goal of learning or finding that property?
For me, it was a lot of online research. I had listened to podcasts, I'd read, trawled
Mhm.
through forums, and these were all very helpful resources, make no mistake. They were great resources, but I just needed a sounding board for my ideas. So I was seeking kind of like an additional level of customization, and I wanted to be able to discuss those things one-to-one with someone who had experience with seasoned investors. And so that's where the difference really came in. And I also wanted to know who I was in business with. So, um, Property Investors Academy, I know that I'm speaking to Sana and Mona Ali, whereas online, I don't necessarily know the credentials of the people who I'm getting advice
Mhm.
from. So in one way, in one respect, that does make you think a lot about your own decisions, and it really does put you at the helm of your decisions. You have to critically analyze all the information you're seeing online.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, sometimes you just want that additional level of advice, and you sometimes just want that sounding board.
So what makes me curious is, I mean, I know you touched on it earlier, that, on online forums, there's so many of them, right, on Facebook and outside as well. Why do you think they don't work?
Well, I think that they can work for some buyers. I don't think they'll work for all buyers. I think many people have probably learned investing through trial and error, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all, because those people are now on these forums sharing their insights, and they're sharing what worked for them and what didn't work for them. So um, we're very lucky to now be in a stage where we do have access to these forums and to this level of insight and information, which previously wouldn't have been so easy to access unless perhaps you went to meetups or knew someone who had invested successfully or got the services of a professional. So I do actually think that they work for some buyers who perhaps just want to experiment on their own and don't necessarily want to pay for a service. But for me, the Property Investors Academy was quite reasonably priced for the huge amount of value it delivers and the huge amount of education you take away from it. And for the reasons I mentioned before, knowing who I was doing business with, knowing where I was getting my advice from, having a sounding board with really experienced investors, that was a big draw for me.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. Some people can definitely go and learn uh, through forums and like trial and error. Um, but I also think that, as you called out earlier, that you don't know who's posting on there, right? If they've ever bought, say, half a property and they are posing as this expert and giving out advice, even though they have not implemented it. I mean, it's easy to transition into that, right? Not being a practitioner, but just sharing with people what you think makes
Yeah.
sense from an investment strategy. That's a challenge I found in my journey early
Yeah.
on. And
And
yeah.
also with some of these online forums, they're great resource, and we've ourselves made use of them in our own journey early on. But it's like lots of different opinions. Which part do you really follow? Who do you listen to really? How do you hone in on your own strategy? How do you narrow down on what you should be doing? So it could, if anything, it could get really confusing because everyone's saying something different.
That's right. And the other thing is also buying in the Sydney market. I'm pretty much putting my life savings into this property. So I also didn't necessarily want to, go via trial and error route. I wanted something a little more assured. It's not a cheap property market.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you find out about the Property Investors Academy?
So it was actually quite a long journey. One of the forums I would frequent, I had first come into contact with Property Twins there. I'd seen your posts. I kind of had an idea of your investment methodology, and I had downloaded a cash flow spreadsheet you'd shared on the site, and I just thought it was really thorough and very helpful in analyzing a couple of those early deals I was looking at. And so I had joined your online communities, and when you had announced that you were coming out with a new service offer, I was really curious. It sounded exactly down my alley, so I think I had responded pretty much as soon as I saw the email hit my inbox.
Awesome. And at the time, obviously, you would have had some fears. Would you be open to sharing what those fears and reservations about joining were? Because I know we had a couple of conversations at least.
Yeah, so my key reservation was that there wouldn't be the level of individual contact that I was wanting with Sana and Myrna. So I was wrong in this, which was great for me. But my initial reservation was that all conversations I had would be in a group setting, and therefore I would be posting my listings in a group setting. I'd be revealing kind of all the details of my property search in a group context, and I felt that was perhaps slightly contradicting my own personal interests to post that all publicly. But that wasn't actually the case at all. I think the Academy actually strikes a really nice balance between group learning and kind of customized individual mentoring, where Sana and Mona have set up direct lines of communication with each of their mentees where you can share the more private details. And then you have the group forums where you get to learn together. You learn from the questions other people are asking. You get to post your analyses and share those with other people. So yeah, you really get to gain a corpus of knowledge as a group.
Yeah, well, we've been asked if we can have an alumni meetup as well already, which is pretty awesome because, it is a close-knit group, and as you said, everyone does get the opportunity. But what I'm curious is, just based on your journey, can you tell us about the moment you decided to join the academy? Like, what was the turning point and you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
For me, when I was weighing up buyer's agency versus joining the academy, I was always leaning towards the academy, but the one thing that I needed to know was that I would be able to have a direct line of communication with the team. Once I knew that I would, that was pretty much all it took to sign me up at that stage. I had an idea of what the modules would be. I was really keen on all the course content. I was keen to learn alongside the group, and we've actually seen some really fantastic group collaborations happen as well, where people have been looking in similar areas and they've been sharing insights and they've been sharing advice on the experiences they've had with agents and the areas within those suburbs that are nice and not so nice. And it's been really fantastic to see the kind of collaborative environment that's come together in the academy. But yeah, that was the key thing. I did want to have a bit of direct mentorship because I wanted to be able to ask questions directly related to my property. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't about to buy a lemon, and I wanted to be able to get feedback on the listings that I was looking at, and that can be quite a private matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And tell us, when you joined the Property Investors Academy, when you started, how did you feel? What was the journey like as you progressed?
It was really fast. The timeline to reach my first milestone was very short. It was within, I think, roughly a fortnight that I had locked in an investment strategy that had previously eluded me for so long, and that's because I could talk to the team and talk to the group about my ideas and my circumstances, my goals. I found that the Property Investors Academy gave a really clear process for thinking through investment. So just to give an example, like starting off firstly with your goals, then using your goals, putting numbers to your goals and using that to work out a strategy to understand how many properties you'd need to buy, how expensive those properties might be or what kind of growth those properties may need to deliver, going down the funnel to the point where you're understanding what you must have and what you must not have in a property. Then you're able to really narrow down on key locations that suit your strategy, that suit your goals, and finally securing a property. So I do think that funnel really drives you towards taking action and does drive you towards a real outcome. And that's what I found really helpful.
So for anyone joining, I guess it's important, just like yourself, that you need to really have a goal and work on it actively. It's not really for someone to sit and procrastinate, for example. It's just something that is really designed to direct you towards that one goal to secure a good property for yourself quickly.
That's right. And I just want to back up that point that Mona's just made, that the Property Investors Academy, it's for people who want to learn. It's not that Sana and Mona are going to puppeteer you or they're going to tell you where you should buy. This is about you applying your learnings to then make your own decisions and to take ownership of your purchase and doing it in a manner that you feel supported and that there's a bit of a safety net.
Sure. And I'd be curious to know, Lasya, what have been the most helpful lessons and takeaways for you, and how did you apply them?
Yeah. So one I've already kind of touched on, which is, narrowing down as quickly as you can, and, doing that by clarifying your goals. I've covered that, so I won't go through that all again. But I thought another really helpful takeaway is there is no perfect property. There are just properties that tick your essential boxes and that maybe tick some of your nice to have boxes. Those are the ones that are worth serious consideration. It's very easy to, spend months and months searching for a unicorn property that just doesn't come across your path, and then you may miss the market. The market may move on without you. You may be priced out of the suburbs you were interested in.
Yep.
So especially in a rising market like this, fast action is pretty important, and it helps to know that there's no perfect property. I don't think there's a single property that I saw which I felt was a perfect property.
So there's no unicorns really. Yeah, no
That's
unicorns.
right.
And I think you've touched on it a little bit, but just covering just to ask you in a different way, like what surprised you the most about the Property Investors Academy?
It was definitely the level of one-to-one interaction I had with the Property Twins team. So there were some Saturdays where Sana, Myrna, and Sirat were on the road with me on the phone. I was texting. I was like, oh, I'm thinking of upping my offer by this much. And just like it was great to have that support, that encouragement, and that insight on the road. It was just a level of support that I didn't expect at all, and I was really really very pleasantly surprised by.
Awesome.
And what do you, of course, there's positives, there's ups and downs with anything. What do you think was the hardest part of the learnings that you had to do in the process?
I think a major milestone for many first-time investors is making the first offer. It's definitely a high point. I wouldn't say that it was a low point by any means, because being able to, even though the first property I made an offer on, I missed by just 7K, which did sting a little bit, but it still felt great to have made the offer, because it was a confirmation of my confidence in my strategy, that I was now actively pursuing that strategy. I wasn't procrastinating on it. That was, a big tick for me. Another kind of hard point I think many people who are in the market right now are experiencing is just it is psychologically strenuous to be purchasing property in a fast rising market. It's difficult to sometimes swallow having to put up tens of thousands more on a property than a similar property that sold just down the street a month ago. And I think that's a mental roadblock that you just have to push past if you want to secure a property. You just have to go in strong, and going in strong, it can be hard to gauge as well when there aren't many direct comparables. And to anyone who has made an offer or a few that, just hasn't worked out, I would say don't be disheartened. It often takes, making a few offers before you start to get a sense of how the market is moving, and you start to get a sense of the offer process, and you just grow your confidence from there.
Absolutely. So it's about building that mental muscle in a way, to go along and make offers. And often people may get concerned if it's a rising market, and each listing is different, or sometimes it's very, very scattered sales. But I guess having that system in place and having the resources and tools, and when you're really sure about your strategy, which Lasya, you refer to, that you really narrowed down on what you were looking for and had that down packed, that I think that's kind of half the battle with many people, because they're not clear on what exactly they're looking for. The clearer they are on what they're looking for, the quicker they'd be able to make a decision and make quick decisions in terms of finalizing that deal.
Yep. Absolutely.
Do you think, though, in this process, did someone discourage you from trying, or something that made the process harder?
To be honest, I really didn't have that experience of anyone discouraging me or making the process harder for me. I think, though, that once I had committed to my strategy, I had that high level of confidence in what I was doing. No one could have really told me to do otherwise unless they had very sound reasoning. And I didn't really have that experience where I was discouraged from pursuing this property that I had gone after.
And at any point, did you ever feel that, oh, I want to quit? And how did you overcome that? Did you ever feel that way?
I never felt that I wanted to quit, but there were definitely moments where I just felt exhausted by the process. You can go out visiting multiple open homes on a Saturday, and then you've got the intense period where you're bidding, and just you don't really have much time to make these decisions. You often have to make these decisions really, really within a very compressed time frame. For example, I had the property I bought, it was listed on a Friday and I had put it under offer the following afternoon. So it's such a
Well,
wildly fast market. So you do feel a
it
little
is.
bit of the strain, especially if you're juggling it with your job, your other responsibilities, taking care of your family, as it may be the case for some people. So
Yeah, it is very emotionally intense, but of course you had to act really fast on the purchase. But the area, it's so up and coming and with so much potential for growth and development happening in Sydney. So I think you've done great by acting fast on it, and you can't be just chasing the market, especially in a rising market. And I'm curious, what was the first big win you got in Property Investors Academy, or the moment you realized, oh wow, this actually works?
the first big win was definitely making that first offer. That was the point at which I realized, yes, I know what I'm doing. I'm committed to this market that I've been looking at, and I have the confidence to secure something. That I would have to say that was the first big win.
Sure.
Excellent. And in terms of, the biggest, most exciting result that you achieved as part of this journey?
Definitely making the purchase and doing it in a way where I did take the leap and I did go strong on the offer. Before you make an offer, you might wonder, will I look back and regret it? And I haven't regretted it. Time will tell whether I've made a good investment, but I'm pretty confident that I have.
So tell us a bit about that moment when it happened, actually, that you purchased. Like, tell us, how did it feel? What did you go through at that time?
Well, I had an opportunity to increase an offer I had made. The agent gave me a call, asked if I wanted to beat another offer, and I had that moment where I was like, am I willing to commit, X amount of money more to secure this property? It's a little bit more than I expected to pay. But that said, I felt that the investment value proposition stacked up. So I said yes. And then it was just, a moment of elation afterwards where you realize that it's happening.
Excellent. That's
And
good.
and were there any other milestones that you went through in this journey?
Yeah, I'd say another key milestone was making my first few deal analyses. The reason I say that is because you just really start to get a clearer idea of what it is that you're looking for as you analyze more property deals. It's almost like you're training yourself up for the actual purchase. So being able to make those analyses effectively and more efficiently with each one, I would say that was a milestone, because you just get better and better at discarding the deals that aren't right for you,
Yeah.
and progressing with the ones that could be.
Yeah, totally agree. It is a lot about discarding, right?
And also just applying the knowledge that you've learned and really improving it as you go along with each deal.
That's right. And I was at a I was at dinner with two friends not too long ago, and I was, giving them the play-by-play of my purchasing journey and all the details, all the exhaustive details like War and Peace from Tolstoy of the property that I had bought. And one of my friends who had recently purchased a property using a buyer's agent said, "You sound like my buyer's agent." So, big compliment. What does it say? PIA not only does the academy drive you towards your first property purchase, but it's also training up potential future buyers agents.
That's true. That is so funny. But how do you think your life is different now? And why is it important to you?
Yeah, I think right now I'm kind of laser focused on that race to settlement. But once, all the dust settles, so to speak, I have that confidence that this is a process I can repeat again and again. That's what I would say the critical difference has been.
Yeah.
I now know that I can go through this process to purchase another property. I know that I have the skills, the knowledge, the tools to be able to do so and to select a high quality asset. And so that's been a really helpful learning from the academy that I just don't think you can easily get elsewhere.
So that brings me to the question that, are you able to tell me about a moment where you said, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is, really happening. I'm actually purchasing."
Yeah, probably when I first broke the news of my purchase to my family, and I was like, well, guess what I just did? I just bought a house.
That is so
Then
funny.
it felt kind of strange to say, but at the same time, I'd been thinking about it for quite a while, and by the time that I actually did purchase, it just felt like it was something inevitable.
Excellent. And yeah, Mona, you want to
And
ask?
now that you've had this success, what's next for you? What are you excited about next?
Oh, well, where to begin? On one hand, I'm very excited to have my weekends back.
Yes.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I'm excited to, keep engaged with this space. I found that I really enjoyed all my deal analyses. I really enjoyed watching the market. I enjoyed looking at all the properties online. It's just a process I've really enjoyed. And so, when the time is right, I'll do it again.
And that makes me wonder, do you feel that whilst you've enjoyed the process, do you feel that the academy has really given you the hang of, really cutting to the chase and getting to the crux of property investing? Would
And
that
buying
be?
the right property and avoiding the mistakes, really.
I think so. Yes, I think so. And I think going through this entire process to purchase has also really told me a lot about the way I think, what I look for, the decisions that maybe stumble me the most and the ones that I make really easily. So I have a better understanding of myself as an investor as well. And that also, I have this bank of knowledge I can draw upon in the future. And I'm also, excited to see how the rest of the academy also progresses. There are a lot of members who are achieving some fantastic results and starting to secure properties. It's kind of like dominoes.
Yes.
It
And
is.
so that's also very exciting to see. And I plan to continue to be engaged with the academy. Even though I've purchased a property, I'm still engaged with all the learnings because I just think they're valuable.
I just have a question. Sorry, just I just wanted to ask, like 90 days, right? Initially, the program was 90 days. But you purchased your property in 54 days, so obviously it enabled you to pull the trigger really quickly. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think for someone who is very new to property investing and perhaps hasn't given it that much thought. They know it's something they want to do, but they haven't really done much research beforehand. It may take longer. I had been actively researching for a while, so I had some initial ideas. So the first phases were about validating those ideas and really getting to a point of solidifying my strategy, and that happened quite quickly. But for someone who hasn't done all that online research already, it may take them a little longer to get to that stage where they've settled their strategy. So that's what I would say about the 54 days. But
it fast tracked you getting to that end goal, right? Like,
that's
had you
right.
not joined the academy, had you not joined the academy, where do you think you would have been at this point in time? Do you think you would have purchased, or maybe still looking?
Maybe, but yeah, I could have still been tossing up between different strategies, or I could have purchased an asset that wasn't as suited to my goals. That's entirely possible. If I had purchased back when I was still looking more from a first home buyer, owner occupier perspective, it's quite likely that I would have purchased at that time a property that isn't as investment grade as my current property, or isn't as suited to my life goals. And so, many people say that they regret not having gotten into the property market sooner. You can always look back and, look at prices as they once were and wish that you had gotten in sooner. But had I gotten in sooner, would I have made a better decision? Can't really say for sure that I would have.
And do you think you have avoided expensive mistakes through the process?
Yeah, I would say so. It's possible that I may not have made a mistake, but this process really gave me the assurance that I haven't. Yeah.
And say, what advice would you give to someone who was in the same situation as you were in before the program? What would you tell them?
If you're keen to learn and you're keen to take action and purchase your property, then do that today. Get involved, start learning as much as you can, whether that's through the Property Investors Academy, which I recommend, or through other sources. There's no time like the present.
That's so true. And is there anything you wish you had done differently in this process, or are there any mistakes that you've made that you can now avoid as a result?
Yeah, there was one property that I was pretty interested in. I came very close to securing that property, but then the price it was reaching in the offer process was just really stretching my upper limits. And so I was quite hesitant to make the leap and put down the amount of money that was being requested. In retrospect, when I had later gone home and reviewed the financials and the ask, I realized that actually the investment value proposition was quite decent. And so I had regretted not taking my resources on the road with me. I would highly recommend to anyone that they take their spreadsheets, they take their laptop, they take whatever documents they need to take on the road with them, because in a market like this, you're often, the houses are going under offer within hours of the open home, and you need to make decisions quickly, and you need to give yourself the tools to make those decisions. So that was one just micro learning and mistake that led to that micro learning.
Yeah, awesome. And what would you say to anyone, who might be sitting on the fence about the academy?
I would say that if you are keen to learn the way a buyer's agent thinks, and you're keen to learn how to go about selecting the right investment property for your goals, your circumstances, then this is a great program for you. It's not a program in which you will coast and all decisions will be made for you. It's a program in which the outcomes you achieve are commensurate to the level of effort and investment you put in. And so go into this expecting to apply yourself and expecting to reap the rewards of that knowledge, because it's knowledge that you can apply again and again. So, it's not just a one-time purchase that you'll benefit from it. You can apply the learnings to multiple purchases, whether your goal is to build a multiple property portfolio, whether your goal is to maybe leverage through investment up into a family home. This will assist you over the long term.
Absolutely.
So we do have a couple of students or mentees who are actually home buyers, and they're working through the program so they could secure the right home for them as well.
Yeah. And any other comments from you, Lasya, before we dive into any Q&A from the members in the group? But do you have any other last minute thoughts, comments?
I just wanted to thank the team for all the support they've given me. It's been fantastic to work with the whole Property Investment Academy team, and I've really benefited from it, and I'm keen to take some questions and hopefully help some others who are either interested in the program or interested in purchasing a property.
So we do have a few people watching live. So guys, if you want to pop in the questions in the comments, and then we can take them to Lasya. While we are at it, congratulations, Lasya.
Thank you.
Well done for backing yourself in your journey.
How long
Thank
till
you.
settlement?
7th of June, so not long at all.
Wow, it's around the corner, literally two weeks.
Yes, exactly.
Have you advertised the property for rent already?
It will be soon.
Soon. Excellent. Good stuff. Great. It's been really, really rewarding to see you achieve the goal that you have achieved in this time. With us. I don't know if you have any questions. We have 15 people watching right now.
Yeah.
I guess nobody's questions up. I'm guessing we've answered every single question that people may have been thinking about through the questions that we went through or the discussion we had.
Yeah. And I guess just to also note that, you've bought in a rising market, and with us just passing the 2017 peak, right? Of course, we don't have a crystal ball as to where the market will go, but you would think with the infrastructure that's coming in the area, it will be in demand for the long term.
Yeah, I hope so. And actually, that's a great lead into a point that I learned from Property Investors Academy, which is, balance data with balance kind of quantitative data with qualitative analysis. And I think you used the great example of kind of like one horse towns, where I guess like
the data looks good.
Has its economy entirely dependent on a particular industry, and while that industry is booming, the data looks great. But then when you actually look at some of the qualitative factors, they don't necessarily stack up for an investment, because you are placing all your eggs in one basket, which is the performance of that industry.
Yeah. So it's a combination of things that you need to bring together to make a quality investment.
Yeah. And you're right. And, in the industry, often people, there are some experts who are just saying it's all data, but it's not. You need to, we are using certain data sources to corroborate with the qualitative factors, but I personally feel for me to be satisfied to invest in an area, there has to be some qualitative factors to go with it. But again, we dive into that in the academy. We have one comment, or a few actually.
So Ramesh says lots of useful information and very easy to understand. Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Ramesh, for the feedback. Tamas
Thanks, Ramesh.
Saying, well done, congratulations. I could have missed the first few minutes, but could you please share what sort of property did you buy? Could you answer that? Lasya first, because there's a second part to this question as well.
Sure can. I bought a property in a Western Sydney suburb, a house and granny flat, about 700 square meters block, and located close to transport and major infrastructure developments.
Excellent. And then Tamas is wondering, did you learn about taxation and debt restructuring? Perhaps you could answer that, and then Sana and I could jump in as well on that.
So a lot of this content, things like tax and the structuring of your mortgage, I think are very personalized to your situation. So it's ideal to speak to a mortgage broker or an accountant who can look at your balance sheets, can look at your financial situation and advise you on the best options for you. So that's where I've gotten most of that information from. We did have kind of an overview in the academy, but really that's what you rely on your mortgage broker or accountant for.
Yeah, absolutely. So agreed with that, Lasya. So taxation and debt restructuring, that's very, very specific to individual circumstances, and a program can't teach you that or to give you an answer to your circumstances. A number of Property Investors Academy mentees are actually our finance clients also. So obviously, you know, we do apply the best practice that comes with, you know, ensuring their loans are set up correctly from a tax efficiency point of view and minimizing risk. So we cover that off on the finance front. The program itself won't tell you how to structure your finance. You need specific advice.
There is plans to put together some high level finance training for the group to understand the gist of, you know, what makes a good structuring potentially, but the program scope doesn't cover credit advice because that's very personalized, as Lasya called out.
Yeah. And Abdul is saying congratulations on your purchase, and yes, you do sound like a BA. Wish you best of luck. So Lasya, you're sounding like a buyer's agent now. So.
I'm very flattered.
Christabel, thanks Lasya for the useful information. Sana or Mona, are you helping investors interested to buy investment property in another state? That's right, Christabel. So we do have a number of Property Investors Academy members who have purchased interstate as well, or outside of the city they reside in. So the program is geared towards equipping you and educating you, and then you pull the trigger as to where you would like to buy the property. Yes.
But we do operate as buyers agents as well. Again, though that's a separate discussion, but the academy teaches you effectively how to narrow it down on the right areas interstate as well. So I think that's all for comments at this stage. So guys, look, if you want to get started, schedule a chat for Property Investors Academy on meetme.so/Property Investors Academy.
Sarat's posted a link as well.
Yep. So that's meetme.so/Property Investors Academy. So we don't have any other comments at this point.
But even if people post the questions later, and if you're watching replay, just put in #replay and feel free to post your questions when you watch it, and we will either come back to you or check in with Lasya if Lasya has any feedback for you guys as well. So the chat doesn't end here. Just feel free to pop in the questions and we'll let you know.
Awesome.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Lasya, for setting aside this time so late on a Monday night for us, and I'm hoping our members of Property Addicts Australia group will find this helpful on their own journeys as they go and buy their own investment property. So we really, really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge with us today.
Thank you
so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanks.